welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Diane, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder, and today's episode is brought to you by Puracy. Puracy makes high-quality natural household products without all the BS. Bad stuff. Get it? Today's episode is also brought to you by Fairhaven Health. Fairhaven Health is introducing a new product, the Sage Personal Moisturizer and Lubricant, which we'll hear more about both of those things later. But right now, Diane has our review of the week, I believe.
I do. Yes, it's that time for the review of the week. And it is from, let me extend it here, Amblin, I hope I have that right, Amblin 09. This podcast is perfect for pregnant women. This podcast has eased so many worries and made me feel empowered and educated. Even though there is so much info to learn before I have my first baby at the end of June, I hope that worked out well for you. I can take comfort in knowing where to go for reliable information. One episode suggestion I have is providing information for moms about their options if they cannot breastfeed or for whatever reason. I'm high risk and I'm worried something may happen, but I'm fully intended to try. How do I get a hold of donated breast milk? Is it safe? How do I pick the right formula? And those are great suggestions. I think we'll definitely put that stuff on our list because that is, I think a lot of people do wonder about donated breast milk. Is it safe? Things like that. And I think that's a great thing for us to talk about, you know, for people, and even like where you can donate, because there's a lot of moms who really want to donate. So we should probably talk about that one of these days. So we're going to put that on the list. Thank you so much for the suggestions. And I hope everything is going well with your little one. And we love to hear suggestions and what you like and ideas and what, you know, is working for you in your breastfeeding journey, what it's like. Shoot us a review, put it on iTunes, and that will help the podcast a lot. But if you just want to email us, you can do that too at badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com. And you can also go on our website, check out all the cool things there, and fill out one of those contact forms, and that'll come to us too. But yeah, that's it. Today, I'm kind of excited about today's episode because it is World Breastfeeding Week. Ta-da! Welcome. And World Breastfeeding Month. So, you know, all of August. And it's cool because throughout August now, the next few episodes, we are going to have some really cool things about different breastfeeding situations or experiences for different cultures all around the world because it is World Breastfeeding Month now. So we got some cool stuff to share.
Yeah, and so the first week is World Breastfeeding Week. The second week is Native Breastfeeding Week, where we are going to have an interview for that. The last week is Black Breastfeeding Week, where we will also have an interview. So yeah, we've got lots of stuff planned to celebrate this whole month.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't even realize that there is a month dedicated to breastfeeding. So, this is when we like totally pull out all the stops, grab, you know, get information out there, make sure everybody knows all the things. And then today we're going to talk about some really cool, like, I know we usually do like, you know, very specific, okay, we're going to talk about plugged ducts. We're going to talk about this or the other thing. But today we're going to talk about like breastfeeding around the world and what that looks like. I mean, it's really, really cool to learn some of the things that go on in other countries with as far as like breastfeeding norms and cultures and things like that.
Yeah, and we talk about like the United States, and we're usually focused on the United States. Obviously, we're here. Most of our listeners are here. But breastfeeding happens around the world.
Yeah.
And in some place it happens much, much easier and much healthier than it does here.
And more supported sometimes than here.
Yeah. And there's some places that are pretty much like the U.S. and sometimes even worse off. So we can learn a bit about that today because I think, well, we've got the rates out there, so we can let you know, and we've got some stories from around the world too. So
yeah,
let's get started.
So what do you want to start with? Stories or rates? What do you want to do?
I don't know. Maybe let's talk about what do you have there in front of you? Diane was our rate lady. Do you have like the best, the worst?
I do. And actually, it's quite fascinating. It's fascinating and not fascinating at the same time, if that makes any sense. In my mind, that makes sense, but to other people, it might not. But what I really find fascinating about it is that high-income countries, the rates of breastfeeding are lower.
Yeah.
And the low-income countries, the rates of breastfeeding are higher. But in the high income countries, the breastfeeding rates are higher among high income people. Does that make sense? Like, it's just, it's backwards in the countries itself, but overall it's not. Like, it's weird, but
well, I feel like some of this, because there's a really popular this happens in the United States, but it is kind of a global thought that like breastfeeding is for poorer countries,
right.
and once you have enough money, you should bottle feed and you should buy formula because you can afford that.
Yeah. And I used to see that when I worked in the hospital setting. In the hospital that I worked at, there was a high, what's the word I'm looking for? High rate of immigrant women having babies.
Yeah.
And those women a lot of times would formula feed from the onset, you know, and some cultures don't believe in colostrum and, you know, things like that. So sometimes they would use formula. And I always was like, if you were in your own country, you wouldn't be doing that, you know, like, but they're here in America and that's what the rich people do. That's what you do in America, where there's a lot of money and it's just offered to you to use this formula. But in the lower income countries where you don't have the money to buy the formula, you don't have the clean water to make the formula, you don't have the education behind it, and everybody is breastfed for years and years and years and years, and, you know, like generations of people are being breastfed. That's what you do. But here in America, they're like, oh, but formula is the same. So let's just do that because that's where we are. We're here. It is really quite fascinating.
Yeah, and this comes down to the aggressive formula marketing.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is we talk about that a lot in the United States, but this is global.
Yeah.
This is totally a whole worldwide problem of aggressive formula marketing, and some countries have really locked it down, and others have not.
Right, we're not good at that.
No, some countries are not good at it. Other, we're not the only ones that aren't good at it.
No.
I mean, I think this is important to kind of make us, because in the United States, just first of all, anybody who lives in a country and say never leaves, because that happens, you know, you tend to think of your country as the center of the world, and especially in the United States, because it's the U.S., and it's kind of like everyone's always focused on the U.S. So then if you're in the U.S., you're like, oh, well, we are the center of the world. But we're not. There's other countries out there. You know, there's other countries that are on this planet with us. Right.
And it's not like, I always kind of feel like, oh my God, I'm totally bashing my own country. And I'm not, like, we're totally not, you know, bashing the United States, but there's some things that we do well here and there's some things that we don't do well here. And one of the things that we don't do well is support women and mothers and breastfeeding.
No, and the biggest mistake you can make in any country is to blindly support your country without analyzing and criticizing and critiquing what's going on there.
Right.
Because people get hurt and people suffer, and that's not okay.
One of the reasons why I say that too is that in all the things that I've read, and we've known this forever, but I'm just going to like bring it up again, is that breastfeeding rates, like when they're looking at breastfeeding rates, they look at like babies that are ever breastfed. And that means if you latch that baby once in the hospital, statistically, your baby was ever breastfed, right? Like you are counted as ever being breastfed, even if it doesn't continue. So the stats of babies ever being breastfed are pretty high. Like they're pretty high. And then you see it go down a little bit, down a little bit, down a little bit. And then as women go back to work, which in our country, in the United States, is very soon, that's when those statistics really, really, really drop. And that is where, you know, and then the harder it gets and the harder it gets and the harder it gets. And so much research shows, like, the more we support these women going back to work, giving them a place to pump, allowing them to pump, not, you know, supporting their pumping efforts, things like that, the rates of breastfeeding would be higher.
Well, and that's a nice little, just to throw this quick little story in here before we get more on with the rates. Let's talk about Norway for a second.
Yes.
Only 1% of Norwegian babies have ever had breast milk. Have never. Let me say that one more time. Only 1%. 1% of Norwegian babies have never had breast milk.
It's amazing.
Norway is extremely generous with their family leave policy. In Norway, parents are entitled to 46 weeks of leave at their full salary, or 56 weeks at 80% of their salary.
Fantastic.
And this is how you support breastfeeding.
Right.
That right there.
Right. Like, that's a really important piece. And I'm trying to see where Norway is. They're a high income. Yeah, they're a high income country. Mm-hmm. And, you know, how I said earlier, the higher income countries have the lower rates of breastfeeding, but not every high income country, you know, like just statistically, the higher income countries. Right. But this is a great example of the high income countries have the access to support breastfeeding.
Yeah.
They have it shows, because there are several high income countries that do amazing with breastfeeding, and then there are some that do not. So
what's the what's country wins? What's the win for the most? Well, because then the statistics break down too. They like initiate breastfeeding at 3 months, 6 months, 1 year.
Right.
Who's the high? Who's up there?
So the thing that I have here in my hand is ever breastfed rates, which is the, you know, okay, did you ever breastfeed? And then like more in my paperwork, I have the rest of the stuff. But for high income countries, the rates of babies that have ever been breastfed, looks like my top one here is Uruguay with 98.7.
Wow.
Yeah. Sweden is at 98%. Norway's at 95%. Oman is at 98%. There's some really high, you know, for high income countries. Mm-hmm. For low income country, and then there's middle income countries too. But the low and middle income countries, all their rates are really high. Madagascar, 99%. They're the, you know, a low income country. 99% of babies there are ever breastfed. That's amazing. Rwanda, 98.8. Zimbabwe,
yeah, and Rwanda, because we have Rwanda here on our list too. We have this little, Diane found this cool article about like 15 breastfeeding traditions from, you know, various countries around the world. And so there's just, you know, 15, obviously there's way more countries, but they just shared. Before I was sharing more about these countries, I wanted to say, like, you know, countries vary, but also things vary inside of a country. Mm-hmm. So, you know, somebody might hear this and be like, what? That's not how it is. Because just like if somebody said how the United States was, somebody's perspective, I might be like, what? That's not how it is. So this is, you know, this is sort of general, and we're not going to take this as gospel, but, you know. But so for, you know, Diane just mentioned Rwanda. But Rwanda is one of these countries where it seems breastfeeding is, you know, we talk about normalized, but it sounds like it's even beyond that. It's just celebrated. It's one of these things that's just, right? Rwanda?
Yeah. Rwanda and Mongolia.
Is this the one with the country where, I'm trying to remember which one was the one where, if the baby pops off and milk squirts into their people's face,
they celebrate it. Yeah.
They're just like, oh, how wonderful.
I think it is. Yeah, I think that is that country. I think it is Rwanda.
Anyway, so first of all, Rwanda had, in 1994, there was massive genocide where an estimated 1 million people were lost. And so there's a lot of people who don't have their female relatives around anymore to share this, you know, breastfeeding knowledge down the line. But 87% of women exclusively breastfeed for 6 months. But there's a lot of myths, and this is what we run into. We talk about myths in the United States. Every country, not every country, but a lot of countries struggle with this too. Mm-hmm. That just these wives' tales, kind of grandmothers believe that a woman does not have milk for the first 3 days of life. And so a lot of times the grandmothers will bring formula to the hospital, like in an emergency, like, you know, just so you know, you don't have milk for the first 3 days. You got to feed your baby this formula. So that's, you know, these are the things that a lot of people are dealing with, these myths. Mm-hmm. Anyway, go ahead.
Yes. So places like Bhutan, which is a middle income country, 99.3%. which is amazing. Like, these are amazing statistics coming out of these countries. Niger, 98.8%. Peru, 98.7%. Peru's listed as a middle income country. Zimbabwe, 98.1%. Senegal, 98.5%. And this is just, these are babies that are, like I said, ever breastfed. But then you have some of your high income countries. Ireland, 55% of babies are ever breastfed. They're a high income country. Mm-hmm. France, 63% of babies are ever breastfed. It is just Spain, 77%, and then you've got your countries like, your countries that I just like mentioned, your low income poor countries, and they're got like 98%. It's such a drastic difference between these things.
It was not Rwanda, it was Mongolia. Mongolia is the country that's like they're like just partying in the streets about breastfeeding. They're like, it's very common for people to breastfeed into preschool years or even beyond that. People like, clap for people who are walking around breastfeeding and giving thumbs up to people who are breastfeeding in public. And that's where this woman says that she, people would just lean in and kiss her baby while the baby was breastfeeding. Just stick their face right in the baby's face. And like the baby would pop off and like milk might just start streaming out in their face, into the face of the person. And they're just like, oh, lovely. Like they're not disgusted by breast milk. They like think breast milk is like, they give breast milk, they'll pump breast milk and just give it to friends and family because they think it's so like amazing. And people at work have to like hide their breast milk because people will take it. Like they'll just like bring their breast milk to work and then they'll like, people will be like, ooh, breast milk.
And they'll use it.
Just like take it and drink it.
Yep. I read something once about Mongolia that they just like will keep a pitcher in the refrigerator and put it out on the table because they're like, it's food. It's a food. And really like that is it is so crazy how different the mindset. Like here people are like, what? No, we've got this cow that'll give us milk.
No, we have this cow's milk. This cow's milk is like food that we put on the table, which is fine, whatever. But like breast milk then is just like gross.
Right. But
people are grossed. Can you imagine if somebody's breast milk landed on somebody else?
Oh my God.
They would freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And then if somebody spills like a beer on somebody at a bar, they're like, oh, it's okay. No, I know, it was an accident.
Lick it off.
Right.
For God's sakes. But I love like Mongolia. I love that. I totally love that because it's so normalized.
Yeah.
That so cool. They don't even think twice about it. It's just, it's unbelievable. But you had mentioned that about, they breastfeed into preschool
years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I do have something about that, which I'm trying to find it now because it was really interesting. I loved it.
How about while you look for it, we take a break for our sponsors?
Ooh, perfect.
Okay. Today's episode is brought to you by Puracy. Puracy makes high-quality natural household products without all the BS. Bad stuff. What do those smelly and highly toxic household cleaners and soaps have going for them? They work. And if you've ever tried to use other more natural products to clean your house and clothes, you know that effectiveness is the trade-off. Puracy has succeeded in creating plant-based, safe, and effective products that actually outperform those chemical cleaners. They've harnessed the power of Himalayan pink sea salt, sustainable coconuts, pure olive oil, and essential oils, and consult with doctors, chemists, and pediatricians to formulate products such as their natural stain remover, natural multi-surface cleaner, and gel hand sanitizer. They are 100% made in the U.S., and Diane and I use them in our houses, and we love them.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, they're cool.
Millions of people have kicked their harsh household cleaners to the curb and become loyal customers of Puracy, leaving over 25,000 five-star reviews in their tracks. Head to puracy.com/badass for 10% off of your purchase. Puracy, PURACY.com/badass, and you can use 10%. You'll get 10% off your purchase when you go there. And today's episode is also brought to you by Fairhaven Health. Fairhaven Health is excited to introduce Sage Personal Moisturizer and Lubricant, the newest product in their vaginal care and comfort collection. Products designed to support vaginal health through every life stage. Sage is designed to replenish your natural lubrication and provide temporary relief from vaginal dryness. Vaginal dryness is most common in older women, but there are a handful of other factors that lead to vaginal dryness, like breastfeeding, some antidepressants, fertility and cancer medications, stress, and even exercise can lead to vaginal dryness, and that is uncomfortable. As with all their vaginal care products, Sage is made without estrogen, parabens, glycerol, or coating oils. Check out Sage and all the other vaginal care products at fairhavenhealth.com, FAIRHAVEN health.com, and use promo code BADASS for 15% off your purchase. And head to Badass Breastfeeding Podcast, and you'll find show notes for this episode where you'll find our sponsors, links, the promo codes that you can, just directly use. And you'll find all of our breastfeeding resources, all of our other episodes. Our show notes also will have links. We can put all the stuff that Diane and I are talking about today into our show notes.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're just like blabbing. And you'll also find information about scheduling your lactation consultation with Diane, an online consultation, just you and Diane, and she can fix your problems because she's a magician.
I am.
And
I am magical.
And today's shout out of the week goes to Moms Rising.
Nice.
You can find Moms Rising on Instagram, momsrising.org. You'll find them at momsrising.org on Instagram and on Facebook. And let me tell you a little bit about them. So I'm just going to have to read because, I want it to be in their words. So momsrising.org is an on-the-ground and online grassroots organization of more than 1 million people who are working to achieve economic security for all moms, women, and families in the United States. Moms Rising is working for paid leave, earned sick days, affordable childcare, and for an end to the wage and hiring discrimination, which penalizes so many mothers. Moms Rising also advocates for better childhood nutrition, healthcare for all, toxic-free environments, breastfeeding rates so that all children can have a healthy start, and a national budget that reflects the contributions of women and moms. Hello.
Mm-hmm.
Go follow them. Be a part of what they're doing. You can join them. Join the millions of people. Momsrising.org, Facebook, Instagram, and the interwebs.
Yes.
That's all I have.
It's fantastical. That's a good one. I mean, they're all good ones, but yeah, that's definitely a good one. Okay, so let's talk about extended breastfeeding. And how often do we hear people say, my doctor told me anything after 6 months is water. My doctor told me that there's no benefit after a year to breastfeeding. My mom wants to know when I'm going to stop doing this because he can talk now and has teeth. So why am I still breastfeeding him? As if once your kid gets teeth, they don't need breast milk anymore. I don't know. That's something that is out there in the rumor mill, I guess. But now the thing that, and I said I was going to link this in the show notes because it is, there's some great information in this article that I found, and it's called Breastfeeding in the 21st Century. And they talk all about, they cover everything, like why breastfeeding is important in all these different aspects, including, which we will hopefully get to. Goodness, we've like so much cool stuff to talk about. But like the environmental aspect of breastfeeding, which a lot of people don't talk about. But this says, and this is, I mean, UNICEF covers, they're looking at the world here. So breastfeeding is one of the top interventions for reducing under 5 mortality. To achieve its full impact, breastfeeding should continue up to the age of 2 years, as its protective effect extends well into the second year of life. And children aged 6 to 23 months, any breastfeeding was associated with a 50% reduction in deaths.
Wow.
So if anybody says to you, your breastfeeding does not need to happen past a year because there's no benefit to it, your child should only be eating regular food, this says otherwise. Research tells us otherwise, that it is still an important factor. And people might say, oh, but that's in other countries where, they're more prone to having disease, or they're more prone to being sick or whatever, blah, blah, blah. No, babies are babies. They're going to be healthier with breastfeeding regardless of where you live. And that's what the research tells us. Mm-hmm. And on the other end of it, you don't need to defend your choices to anybody. I'm sorry, you don't.
Right.
So that I think that was a very, very telling statement that 6 to 23 months, any breastfeeding was associated with a 50% reduction in deaths. So when people say, oh, you're being selfish breastfeeding, or breastfeeding, you don't have to breastfeed, or it's okay to not breastfeed all the time, like, do what you feel is right for your baby. And if this is what you want, do it. Because there's a lot there. There's a lot of benefit that people do not talk about.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other things we want to make sure that we highlight here?
Yeah, so Brazil has a little cool story too. Brazil has, the government has come out and strongly endorsed breast milk and increased the breastfeeding rates, and the infant mortality rates to nosedive for more than, for 2 decades. They've been on this campaign, and, everybody's getting healthier. They've regulated the advertising of formula. In 2015, Brazil placed a ban on infant formula advertising. That's what I mean about locking it down. They just banned it.
Good for them.
And here's a cool thing. So the Brazil network of human milk banks is the largest in the world. Of the close to 300 human milk banks in the world, Brazil has 220 of them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Close to 167,000 Brazilian women have donated to milk banks, and they just continue to give their milk there. So that's really awesome.
And for people who are,
so you can turn things around too. We can turn this around.
Oh, absolutely.
You ban the so I mean I don't know. I mean, like, there's so many countries on here, and if you read it from top to bottom, which we'll link it to, you can see how much the formula marketing and the advertising has to do with the low breastfeeding rates and the infant mortality rates. There's a direct correlation.
Yes. So a couple other things I want to make sure I mentioned. We were talking about the maternity leave. Short maternity leave, that's less than 6 weeks, increases the odds of not breastfeeding or stopping early by 400%. That's crazy. So the formula industry, in 2014, global sales of all baby milk formula were about $44.8 billion US. And by 2019, the market value is projected to increase to $70.6 billion. And that was 2019, and we're in 2020. So I'm sure they reached that number, because I don't think they ever not reached their numbers. $billion.
No, and the pandemic is going to they're going to profit off of this.
They're totally profiting off of it. Part of the push this year for World Breastfeeding Month or World Breastfeeding Week is about, the healthier planet and supporting breastfeeding and encouraging governments. How Abby was just saying, like, we want the government to lock down some of these things that are impeding breastfeeding. Because really, if the government doesn't stand forward and say, we need a better maternity leave for our mothers, we need better support for our mothers, we need, more milk banks for mothers to get donor milk if they don't have it, or for the hospitals to be using donor milk for their sick preterm babies. Those are things that could be changed at a government level. So one of the other things that we're looking at too is how breastfeeding and formula feeding impacts our planet. And I think people don't really realize that that's a thing, and how much that impacts what goes on in our planet and how much energy is actually used to make formula. And if you're somebody who's like really all about having that greener planet, then this is something that you can use. You can use this to help people realize how much damage is being done by formula feeding, not just for our kids, but for the planet itself. So breast milk is a natural renewable food that is environmentally sound and produced and delivered to the consumer without pollution, unnecessary packaging, or waste. In contrast, formula leaves a large ecological footprint, requiring energy for manufacturing, materials for packaging, fuel for distribution, water and toxic cleaning agents for daily preparation. They need toxic cleaning agents to prepare this.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States alone, 550 million cans, 86,000 tons of metal, and 364,000 tons of paper annually used to package formula end up in landfills.
Oh, gross.
Breast milk's contribution to more environmentally responsible production and consumption patterns makes it an invaluable resource in reaching global sustainability and climate change goals.
Absolutely. I have a little fact here that I found on the New York Milk Bank. You should follow them too on Instagram.
They're pretty cool.
Yeah. And so it says here 450,000 tons of milk formula sold in 6 Asian countries. Okay, we're talking about 6 Asian countries. We're not talking about the world, just 6 Asian countries. Generated more than 2.9 million tons of greenhouse gases. I mean, this is like, and it's estimated that more than 4,000 liters of water are needed to produce 1 kilo of formula.
Wow.
This is stuff that we don't need to be doing at this rate.
It's so easy to not, you know.
I know. Mean, you're right. It has to be the government. We have to pressure the governments to step in.
Yeah.
And create these.
Yeah. But this is where, like, all you mamas, because you guys might be listening to this going, oh my God, these statistics are crazy. I didn't realize it. But what am I supposed to do? I'm just a breastfeeding mother sitting here listening to a podcast. But this is where, like, if you can support your friends that are having babies, if you can support, you know, start a support group online, on Facebook, put out good, knowledgeable, solid information for families and friends. Be that person, you know, that is going to support breastfeeding for other people. And that goes a long way. It really does. Because that's what we need. We need mothers to feel supported so that they can continue their breastfeeding journey, which is going to make it better for everybody else over time.
Yep. You have the power. Be the change.
Be the change we want to see in the world. Who did that? Like, it was like, I don't know, Gandhi
or something.
Yeah.
We both came up with Gandhi, so it must be right.
We're just throwing his name out there like he's nothing. It's just Gandhi. Who cares? But it's true. And there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of things that that we could sit here and talk about. Because I have other stats that, like, we didn't even touch on that are just so fantastic.
I feel like we could go on forever, and we ran out of time. And so I feel like we can, so go to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com. I'll put this article up there that's about all the different countries, because that is just a super fun read. And it really gives you some perspective on what's going on around the world with breastfeeding. And you have more information.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of the statistical stuff for people who like that kind of thing. You know, talking about like 2025 goals for the world, 2030 goals for the world. You know, things that we are trying to work towards for a healthier world and population. And there's, you know, and this might also give you, depending on what issue you might come up against, this might give you some fuel to really, you know, to stand up for yourself. If other people are telling you, you don't need to breastfeed at work. You don't need to pump at work. You don't need to breastfeed after your child starts solids. You don't need to blah, 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 whatever it is that people are telling you. This could give you more information to, you know, to fight your battle. So
right, and don't believe the hype that America's leading the way on this. We are not. Mm-mm. We are not doing well, and there are a lot of countries that we can look to about what they're doing and how they've managed to get a handle on it, and we could do that. We have to, but it's up to us.
It is
to pressure to put the pressure on.
So happy World Breastfeeding Week to everybody!
Right, and go breastfeed and have fun.
Everybody go breastfeed and have fun, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.